Welcome all. I am Mike, aka Veteran Crypto, and this is Sovereign Soil. So I've been procrastinating a little bit about doing this episode. Mostly just because I've been busy, but I've really decided I needed to get this out. So today, what I'm going to share is my experience. So those that don't know, I retired from the military about 10 years ago. Actually, shit, more than 10 years ago. It was 2015. So it's working on, actually, we just passed 11 years. So pretty soon after that, I sold everything I owned. And I, had a couple of properties and stuff like that. Sold everything out of my house that I couldn't pack up in my truck and went on a road trip and went all up through Montana, northern Idaho, and eastern Washington looking for the right property, where I wanted to build my cabin. I just had this desire, woke up one day and decided that I was miserable. Had this huge house to myself in the middle of an urban environment in Utah. And I was just miserable. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to hit the reset button, going to liquidate everything, and I'm going to find me a property, and I'm going to build my own cabin with my own hands and set out on an adventure. Just kind of keep the adventure going. So that's what I did. And I'm going to kind of share that journey with you and kind of how I picked this property. Hey, what's up, Jay? How's it going, brother? So, before we get started, if you're not familiar, this is our channel over on YouTube. If you want to join the conversation with Jay, then you can pop on over here, and it is at the Node Network, all one word. And you can see we're live right now. Do a quick refresh. There you go. We're live right now. And you can see we have all of our different channels. So here's our morning show with myself and David, the Node. We have Crypto and Chill on Tuesdays and Fridays. We have the Blockchain Report Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, where Jeff does deep dives and airdrops. You can see right here, Sovereign Soil. This is we just started up this channel on our network, and I'm just basically sharing emergency preparedness and homesteading knowledge. Both of them I've been doing for decades now. We have the David's market wrap up daily, where he shares his not shares he does TA, technical analysis. Sorry, been a long day. He shares technical analysis, on about 15-20 minutes of just the top crypto projects and just what's going on in the markets. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he's taken Ellie. She just popped in the chat. He's been taking Ellie and been coaching her and teaching her how to be a successful DeFi trader. So there's that. We got Jeff, where he is a DJ. So he does interviews, does tutorials on basically how to be a DJ. We got the Red Pill, which is Thursday nights, where we usually just have a bunch of drinks and talk about all the stuff you're not supposed to talk about, politics, religion, relationships, all that stuff that usually gets people all hot and bothered. And then Gaming and Chill, Jay and Ellie, that are both in the chat, that's their channel, and that's what they do, gaming. So usually ARC Raiders, but they've started diving into some other ones. Every once in a while, I'll go live with. I started playing a new game called Windrose. It's a pirate game, pretty cool. I've actually really been enjoying it. I'll probably play a little bit after I get done with this. But that's it. So we got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We got 7 channels here at the Node. So we're busy. We're busier than a one-legged man in an ass-kicking contest. So with that being said, let's go ahead and just jump on into this. So I'm just going to share my share drive. This is my personal share drive, where I've saved a lot of my photos, as far as since I got up here, and some of these are from basically when I was living in a tent, hadn't built anything, hadn't done anything. It was like the first week I was on the property. So this is going to be like a little bit of the way back machine. So let's just kind of start going through them. So this is the creek on the property. You can see this is a little bit later because I built this little bridge out to the island. So I have this little island that yeah, it has like a couple little creeks that go around it, and then there's like the one big main creek. So there's like three of them. One goes through the middle of it. One kind of goes to the left and creates a bigger island, and then there's a smaller island because of the big creek that goes around. There's a creek over here that this bridge is going over. This is like a spring, and with a little creek that goes through it to keep it nice and cleaned out. And there's a spring that comes up out of this, and that's usually where I go down and cool off. Like if I'm doing a bunch of work throughout the day, I'll just go strip down, pop the boots off and all the clothes, jump in there, and just it's kind of like a little cold, not a cold plunge during the summer, but in the spring it is. But that's where I just kind of go and hang out. So it's kind of like a hot tub, but a cold tub. Um, and then this is the bigger creek here, and this the same thing. This is the bigger creek on the property. So I probably got, I'd say, a couple hundred yards of creek that go through the border of my property. So super cool. I mean, and that's something I would highly suggest. Is if when you're looking for a property, you definitely want water on it. A pond, a spring, a creek, a river, a lake, something. It's a game changer. It's not something you have to have, but it is a nice to have. And of course, if you don't have a well and stuff like that. So before I built, the creek is where I took a bath. At the end of every day, I went down there with some Dr. Bonner's, kind of biodegradable soap. It doesn't have like all the nasty stuff in it, so it's okay if you get it in the water. A lot of people that can't use it. So yeah, I just had like a freaking washcloth and some Dr. Bonner's. I go down to the creek again, strip down, to down in the buff, and clean myself up. And yeah, it was just that was kind of my bathtub or my shower there for a minute. Um, Actually, you know what? Let me show you the picture of what it looked like. Oh, here we go. Cabin build. So this is what the site where my cabin currently is. So like the one that you saw in the picture for the thumbnail, that's what this looked like. That's what it looked like before I cleared. So like my cabin sits like right where that sunshine is hitting. That's where my cabin sits. And so all like the porch, this rotten stump here, my porch goes like right up to it, and then kind of almost exactly where the light is where my cabin is. So you can kind of see this is before I chainsawed any trees down, before I had anything bulldozed, any of the area cleared. That's what it looked like. So let's go back to here. So this is what it looked like after I had the area cleaned out. Let's go back to here. There we go. That's a better picture. So this is what it looked like after I prepared the site, got it all leveled, did the footings and the foundation. So you can see, of course, all the brush and all the trees are cleared out. You can still see some of the roots. But I'll everything I did here, everything that's done here, I did everything myself. Every aspect of my cabin I built with my own two hands. Well, I take that back. The septic system I paid somebody to do, and the clearing, the bulldozing and stuff like that, I had somebody come in and do. But other than that, I did everything. So I did all of these footings, all the rebar and all that stuff for the foundation to sit on. But yeah, basically that's the long and the short of that. And there's some more. I dug out a root cellar in my basement, so that I can basically my kitchen sits like right over this corner here. And so basically I built it so I can have an island, about right here, because there's a big crawl space. There's about 4 or 5 foot down in my crawl space. You can almost walk around down there. But I built it so that I can put stairs and make that a root cellar. So I can keep my potatoes and my carrots, my onions, all my canned goods, wine, whatever, down there. So I dug it out so I don't have to do it later. And I poured a cement floor in it, put a bunch of center blocks down there. So everything's down there whenever I decide to get around to it. All right. So this is the foundation. So this is basically just a bunch of plywood, and there's these kind of like rods that you drill holes in the plywood, and then put you build the rebar all the way around, and then you put on each side you put this plywood with this bracing, these 2x4 braces, and then you lock it all in. And so these are the forms for the cement. And then after you pour the forms and after it sets a bit, you can actually unlock these and pull the plywood off. So the plywood that I used for the forms, I actually ended up using for my roof sheeting. So it's, being able to reuse things saves you a ton of money. So anyway, but you can kind of see, the footings, that I did the foundation on the footings. That's why you do the footings first, is so that you have this rebar to tie into. So you're not just putting a foundation directly on the dirt, because then you're going to get like settling and you're going to get all kinds of freaking shit that you don't want. All right. Well, before I get any further, let me share a little bit. Let's see. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me put the chat up so I don't miss any of your comments. Yeah, no, it's there's plenty of plenty of digging to do. All right. So, how I picked the property, and I took like 3 or 4 different trips before I sold everything and bought a property. I looked all over, and I wanted to find a place that had a creek that went through it. Like I said, wanted to make sure. Excuse me. First and foremost, I wanted to make sure I had water on the property. Some kind of creek, pond, lake, something. And I wanted it to be remote. I wanted to be as far away as possible from a city or town, and especially a larger city. Um, but I at the same time I wanted it to not be too difficult to get to, because there's a lot of remote properties that, I mean, shit, there's some that you need a helicopter or an airplane, a bush plane to get to. And I didn't want that. And I didn't want to be so far off of a main road that I couldn't, that I would need some sort of, huge snowplow to, keep the driveway clear so that I could get in and out during the wintertime. So there's like a balance there. Accessibility was a big one. Water, and then of course I wanted to, because of easements. If you don't know what an easement is, it's basically where you have to let people through your property. You have to allow there to be a road that goes through your property so other people can get to their property. So I wanted to choose a place that was the end of an easement. So basically the end of the driveway. I didn't want people driving through my property all the time. There is absolutely no reason for anybody to be on my property. I'm the end of the road. So if somebody shows up on my property, they're either lost or they were invited. That's the only 2 options. They're not trying to get somewhere. And they have to go through my buddy's, not my neighbor. They have to go through his property. And actually, they have to go through two of my buddies' properties to get to mine. So, there's gates to go through, and there's a lot that somebody would have to accidentally do to get to my property. So again, nobody just shows up to my property. Something else you have to keep in mind is mineral and water rights. So they don't always come with the property. Sometimes they do. These days, usually not. Usually by the time, in this day and age, the water rights and or mineral rights have been sold off separately. They can get pretty spendy. So you need to make sure that you understand who owns the mineral rights and the water rights, because it gives them certain rights on your property. So that's important to understand. What's something else you want to? A big one that almost bit me was the content of the soil. So I have a lot of clay on my property, and it's specifically called modeling clay. And when you're doing a septic system, the soil needs to be the right consistency for the septic to absorb into the dirt. So everything that comes out of your house, the gray water. So you have your septic tank, which usually has 3 chambers in it. The first one collects most of the solid waste, most of the solid material, and then enzymes in there that you put in there will help break all that down. And then that will overflow into the second one, which will, like, again, filter out a lot of the solid material. And then there's a third one to further filter it out. Once it gets to that one, you can either have gravity fed if the septic field is close enough, or in my case, I had to do pump to field, which made it much more expensive. But back to my point, with all the clay that I have on my property, I almost wasn't able to get a permit for the septic system because the inspector was saying that there was too much clay in the soil, that it wouldn't absorb, the water, basically the gray water. So I had to I almost came to fisticuffs. I almost was ready to fight with the guy because I had already started my foundation. I was already this far along, actually further along than this. And actually, let me see. Yeah, I think I was about right here when I had the dude come out. So I was already in the process of building, which was my bad. And so luckily, I don't know if the septic dude that was doing my septic like knew him or something, which I'm sure he did. The inspector and a guy that a professional septic installer. I'm sure they knew each other. So they go off to the side and they do their little yap 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 yap, and 5-10 minutes later they come back and all of a sudden the soil's good. But of course the soil's good where I have to pay twice as much for my septic system. So basically doing a pump to field where I had to go up yonder and and put my septic system way out in the BFE. So anyway, at least I was able to get it done. So that is something that you want to keep in mind. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, and I'll show you mine, is a well. So yeah, here's my septic system. So this is the pipe that comes out of the house. It goes into this tank, and here's the 3 chambers I was talking about. And then there's another pipe that comes out this side that pumps out to the septic. So anyway, this is what I paid 10 grand for was this. So anyway, and here's me and my neighbor John. He was the foreman. So this is us putting together the foundation forms. So this is me about 10 years ago. You can see a lot less silver in my beard. All right, what else we got going on here? Oh, here's the cement truck. Shirtless me going to town. Basically, again, this is something that the truck came all the way out here, and the cement, as we were pouring it, was already starting to set. And so that was a pucker factor. We almost didn't get the foundation done before the cement was setting. So that was a bit of a pucker factor. Oh, here we go. Here's me and my old dog Kraken. So this is the bulldozer that was out here that leveled everything out. But yeah, this is one of the first steps that we were taking to clear the property. But here's my well. So This we excavated down as far as we could, and then I had to climb down in there, in in waist deep water and dig down further. So I was down there with a bucket and a shovel and had to dig all this out as much as I could to get it as deep as I could, and then used cement tiles, these big round cement tiles, and drop those down in there to create the cistern, and that's the well where I get oh, what permits? Yeah, so the only permits I needed was I needed a septic permit and I needed an electrical permit. So well, and I needed a well permit, but those are the only permits that I needed. Other than that, I didn't have to give any inspections. I didn't have to get my foundation inspected, my framing inspected, my roof, nothing. So just septic, power, and well. So that's one of the reasons I picked where I picked was I wanted to do what's called an owner builder permit. So it cut down the costs immensely. So my entire 20-acre property and my cabin, I'm probably about $140,000 is all I spent, and the property itself was 80. So I spent a total of maybe $50,000 on my house because I did all the labor myself. So, a lot of people say that you can't afford a home these days. You can. You just got to put some work in. And you can get a property. You can still get a really nice property up here for 100 grand or 150 grand. And have a pre-built tiny house. You can get a pre-built tiny house delivered to the property for like 40, 50,000. For like 800, 900 square feet. Little kitchenette, little bathroom, little loft bedroom. It's like, I mean, yeah, it's not a mansion, but for 150 grand, you can have a nice livable place, and you can use that to live in while you build a bigger house, a bigger cabin. And then at least you have a shower, you have a kitchen, you have a bedroom, you have all the necessities, lights and internet, whatever else you want. And then of course you can take your time, building the rest of it. But yeah, Jay, absolutely. 800 square feet, for like a single person or a young couple is perfect, while you build a bigger place. But all right. So that was the big thing. So this is my well, after all the tiles, are in and everything. And I built a pump house. So I upgraded this. So this tank is now in my laundry room because I had a pump out here with all the plumbing and everything. And a couple of years ago, we got down to like 30 below in the wintertime. And so I could not, even insulated, I could not keep this thing hot enough to where it didn't freeze solid and it exploded. Like the tank here didn't, but the pump and all the pipe, all the PVC pipe, it all exploded. And I don't mean like it cracked. I mean it exploded. With the pressure. And so I decided to move it all indoors. So I have a submerged pump down inside the well, and then there's a pipe that's underground that comes into the house into the pressure tank, and then and then of course that goes into the plumbing of the house. So yeah, I mean I still have the pump house out there just to kind of cover everything up, but for the most part it's just a little shed that's above the well. There's not a whole lot of functionality to it. All right, let's see what else we got. All right, so as far as the property goes, those are the major considerations: is accessibility of water. So one thing that I did almost make a mistake is I found some amazing view properties to where they were like on mountaintops, to where there were panoramic views. I mean, as far as the eye could see, just gorgeous. But one was accessibility. So super long road, dirt road to get up to your place. And in the wintertime, you got to clear that. You got to shovel it or, use a snow plow or something. And I didn't want to deal with that. Plus well depth. So my well that I dug, you can't do that, because the well depth, the water level might be, 4, 5, 600 feet down. You don't know. So you got to hire a crew to come out with, a drill rig, and they have to drill down. And you don't know how deep it's going to go. And they charge by the foot. And sometimes it's like $30 a foot. So if you start getting to where, as far as how deep your well is, you might end up paying more for the well to get drilled than you do for the property. So, I mean, let's do some quick math. If you're paying $30 a foot, let's see, $30 a foot, let's just say it's 500 foot down. That's 15 grand. And that's just for the drilling, and the pipe. And they cap it off. That's not for the pump, that's not for, the rest of it. Connecting it to the house, all that stuff. So, wells, and like I said, that's just 500 feet. You might go 600 feet or more. So things to keep in mind, don't just find what you think is your dream property and, and just, buy it. And then all of a sudden, and you have a budget of 50,000 for your little tiny house, and you don't have any money left over. And all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, I don't got water. I need water now. So, all these things are stuff to keep in mind. All right. So let's go through the build a little bit more. So I left off here. So this is, obviously the foundation. And, I put in the vents. So, you don't want condensation and, moisture to build down here. Because if it does, you're going to start getting mold and, rot and stuff like that. So this was the next stage. This was the subfloor. So this is, exactly what it sounds like. See, there's my tent, my dome tent that I was living in, back there in the distance. You can see that was my humble abode for probably about 8 months. I lived in a tent, and like I said, took a bath in the creek. So I had a cot in there with a sleeping bag and me and my dog. That was there was a couple of nights where critters came to visit me, but that's it was an exciting time. All right, what's the next one that I'll share? All right, so you can see after the subfloor and I put the sheeting down, and I started doing the framing, and you can see this is the bedroom where I got my French doors, and the big, like, kind of off in this far corner. Actually, let me see if there's a better picture. Oh, there we go. So these two big windows here, this is where I'm sitting looking out. So when I'm always talking about I'm looking out and, like, watching the deer and stuff like that, I'm basically looking out both these windows. And you can see the French doors there and the front door. But yeah, this is the other picture from the other side. So that other picture was, looking at these two windows on the far side. All right. And then next up was the outside sheeting. So, just like it sounds, I sheeted the outside. And here's a little view of the distance. So this is what the woods was looking like around me at the time. Looks a lot different now. That's the view out the master bath window. You can see I've got a bunch of lumber out there in that dome tent. All right, up next, trusses. So these I actually obviously had manufactured, and the truck came out and lifted them up onto the top. And I don't mean they lifted them into place. They lifted a big stack of them up onto these 2x4s. And so I had to, cut all the banding, and then by hand, I had to drag them with me and just one of my buddies. I had to drag each of these, into place and then hold them while my buddy nailed them in. And so, I mean, these things are awkward. They're awkward as shit. And so I was, basically doing a balancing act on these 2x4s, going back and forth, trying to set all these up and get them, properly placed so my buddy could nail them in. And I already showed you this one. That's after obviously all the roofing is on and the sheeting's done. I got the Tyvek on the outside and I started getting some of the windows in, the windows and doors. Let's see what else we got going on, y'all. Nope. There's me ground guiding the cement truck in. So this is a little further along. You can see this is the wraparound porch that I got, and so these are pretty much all of this wood. Out here on the porch. Now the main structure, the 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 structure itself is is manufactured wood, not manufactured wood, but what's the term that they use? Oh yeah, no, dude, I'll tell you, I've had this has been an adventure. I've loved every minute of it. Dimensional lumber, that's it. So it's all dimensional lumber. So it's stuff that I got from a lumber yard, things like that. Now the outside, the porch, all of the siding and all of the wood that you see inside, like here behind me, and the floors are all wood that I got from either my property or a friend's property. And he has a sawmill and basically churned trees off of our properties into wood for me to build with. All the finish work. So all these 4x4s, actually they're 6x6s, are all milled wood. Local red fir. So it has a really cool look to it. I really like it. Here's another look of the deck. It's all about the size of the deck. And usually if you trim the bushes around the deck, it makes the deck look bigger. So it's always a good idea to keep the hedges trimmed. All right. Oh, so this is, I mean, obviously this is when I got the roof on. It was framed in, didn't have the windows in, but my neighbor gave me an old stove that I could use because it was October and it was starting to get cold. So you can see I got like a little air mattress back here. And you can see I was starting to do the electrical and things like that, but there was no insulation in. There was almost nothing. And again, no windows. So I was like in a race to get at least some windows and doors in, so I could start working on some insulation, so I didn't freeze that winter. So it was interesting. It was down to the wire. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, this is just some of the pictures from when I did a wildfire up here a couple of years ago. I was on a wildfire crew, and it was a fun experience too. But yeah, just going through, after the trying to put out the fire and this guy in a bulldozer, they go through and basically bulldoze fire lines to try to contain. So yeah, good times, good times. So this is a coffee table that I made out of a cedar tree that was out front of my cabin. So it's basically, this is two sides of the trunk, and I just split it in half. And it's the one that sometimes you can see behind me here. And what I did is I took a giant lazy Susan bearing, like a kind of like a ball, giant ring with a bunch of ball bearings, and so this thing spins 360. So basically you can be sitting on the couch and you can spin this thing, to be to where it's wherever you want it to be. So like, depending on where you're sitting, you can move this so you can set your drink and stuff on it. It's just a kind of a cool little thing that I did to, make use of the tree I had to cut down out front. So yeah, just, epoxy, poured epoxy on it, and just, kind of a cool little conversation piece. All right. Oh, some veggies from my garden. Got some zucchinis. What else we got? What else we got? Yeah, this is the creek that goes through my property. Let's see. Oh, yeah, here we go. So this is I wanted a roundabout, in my driveway. And so basically I ended up, and this is, some of the trees I cut down, like to make the coffee table and stuff like that. But a lot of these trees I cleared, and then we had to fill in this little gully so that the driveway kind of comes in the top right of the top right corner of this image, and then the gravel comes here and then loops around and goes back out. So this kind of gives me a nice roundabout, and I'll show you here in a second. So this is the top of my property. So if you hike up, I have a bunch of trails that go up the mountain. And so on one side of my property, I have basically a cattle rancher, and that's all this property. And so that's why my place is so private. Is one side is a cattle rancher. Actually, two sides are the same cattle rancher. Up the mountain is a national forest, and then on the only neighbor I have is the one that helped me build my cabin, and that you have to go through his property to get to mine. So this is the view from the top of my property. There's a cliff up there. And so sometimes I'll go up there and, just to drink a beer, and like the sun goes down over here. So I just go up there and sip a beer and watch the sun go down sometimes. It's a nice little, hike, you get a little bit of exercise, and then a beautiful view. I mean, amazing. You can see it. It's an amazing view. A couple other ones. Here's my garden. So, I got, some planter boxes and stuff like that, and, got it all fenced off so all the critters can't get to it. Another picture of the creek. This is the island down there. Let's see. There's a picture of the cabin through the woods. It's freaking so beautiful up here. I freaking love it. And then there's the cabin during the wintertime. See, and this is my four-wheeler. I got a little snow plow on it. That's how I keep the driveway clear. But this is what it looks like in the wintertime. All right. Oh, and then here's my other project. I'm restoring an old Airstream. So this is the one I was telling Jay. This is the one I was telling you and David and Jeff about, where I got a couple of beds in there, and I got some new floors in there, and stuff like that. But it looks a lot different than this. This was like early on when I was first messing with it. There's me sanding. Yeah, there's me going down. So this is the gravel driveway with the roundabout that I was telling you about. So with trailers and freaking Airstreams and all that, trying to drive in and back out is just a pain in the ass. You got to have a roundabout. If you end up doing a property, highly suggest you do a roundabout. So this is actually not my cabin, but one of my other adventures is my cousin, basically my brother that I grew up with. He bought a 52-foot sailboat, and it has it down in the Caribbean where he does charters. And so every once in a while, I'll go down there and help him, and like do electrical work for him, work on the motor, help him as a deckhand, stuff like that. So, but yeah, this is the boat. So this is when I had to go up the mast and repair some electrical, the lights, the navigation lights up on the mast. I had to go up there and do some work. You can see him all the way down there, basically, hoisting me up and down so that I can do the work. There's a picture of me, my cousin Dave, and one of his buddies down there on the boat. There's a freaking beautiful sunset that just we were out. We actually did a trip in between a couple of islands from Antigua to, I believe it was Montserrat that we went to, and St. Kitts, and a couple of different islands. But yeah, basically we were just in the open ocean, freaking sailing from island to island. Took turns. I took the night shift. I really enjoyed being up at night and just with no light pollution, and no pollution, just freaking crystal clear skies, the stars that you can see, the Milky Way and the stars that you can see is just insane. And I had never seen anything like it before. It was just freaking beautiful. Yeah, here's another sunset. I like to take pictures of my feet in the different places I go. That's kind of my thing. So this is the inside of the Airstream, Jay. So this is pretty much what it looks like now. And I got the one bed back here, and then there's one in the nose as well. So like I said, it's cleaned up and all that. Because I went through and I repainted and did a bunch of stuff in there. So it's I need to put some cabinets in, and so there's a little kitchenette and things, and I might get that done before you guys come. But at least you'll have a nice a nice place to crash out and have your own little private space. So this is the highest mountain in eastern Washington. So I drove over there and hiked up. It's called Abercrombie. Super super cool hike. So I go up there. There is a bunch of huckleberries. So that's why I do a lot of my huckleberry hunting. Is I'll just hike up there, and they're all along the trails. So I'll just, as I hike, just fill bags and then take them home and freeze them, and then I use them all throughout the off season, because huckleberries you can't buy at the store. Well, I mean, you can buy them at the store, but they're not commercial. You can't. There's no such thing as a huckleberry farm, because you can't plant them and cultivate them. They just grow where they want to grow, and it's kind of hard to explain, but nobody's been able to figure out how to commercialize them. So they're super rare. They go for like $50 to $100 for a gallon, a gallon jug of them. It's kind of spendy. So it's kind of a nice treat, to be able to have like huckleberry pancakes and huckleberry syrup and things like that. So anyway, what else we got? One of the trails here on the property. So last year I got really into mycology, and so I went around my property and just snapped pictures, with my phone. Just like got real up, super close, and just took all these cool little pictures of different mushrooms. But yeah, just so I don't know. I nerded out, got into mycology for a minute. So here's me doing burn piles. So as you clear the property, you got to get rid of the branches and all that stuff some way. So basically, just you got to do burn piles. Here's my master bath. This is my deep soaker cast iron, clawfoot tub. So this is a whenever I just want to soak. I got a shower too, but whenever I just want to soak, I can just fill this thing up, and it's all the way up to my neck, and I can just lounge in there. I got a little tray that goes across, and I can smoke a cigar and drink a whiskey and, freaking scroll my phone, do whatever. So, just because you live out in the middle of nowhere doesn't mean you can't pamper yourself. So this is my closet. So the you walk through the master bath. So this is my closet, but you can see I built out little cubbies, got little baskets in there, but all of this wood, the floors, all of this wood, all the walls, the ceiling, that's all that milled lumber that from here off the property. So these are all trees, off of my property. So, but yeah, nice big walk-in closet. Yeah, of course, I got my gun safe. Gotta have the gun safe. Here's the living room. So a little bit different setup now. I'm sitting in this corner. This is where my little setup is, so I can look out these windows. But this couch is the one that's behind me. It's just basically I just rotated it. And then this chair's in the same spot. The TV, basically you're looking at this wall. This wall where the cat tower is. That's gone now, but that's where the TV's at. So that's what you're looking at behind me here. But yep, that's the living room. Hey, what's up, Nick? All right, this is my neighbor's place. So this is the community garden, that we kind of do together. But yeah, this is his cabin next door. Here's the cliff, up there on the mountain where I was talking about before. But this is my nephews and my brother Taylor that you see on the show. They come up here quite a bit and visit. But yeah, we all hiked up there and snapped a couple pictures. This is up on Abercrombie again. You can see there was still snow. They all came to visit. This was their first visit. There's Jeff. Sometimes he's on the show too, and one of his other buddies. But they came up. We went out kayaking and all the stuff that I'm going to take. Jay and if Ellie shows up and Jeff and David, all the stuff that that we went and did with them. We're going to be doing. Yeah, there's me again. Yeah, storms roll in quick at the higher elevations. So this is my favorite kayaking spot. So this is called Pee Wee Falls, and so the only way you can get to it is with a boat. And so yeah, I love going over there and freaking just hanging out. So I'll just paddle up to here. Freaking got a cooler, just pop out a beer, or a freaking White Claw or whatever, and just chill, and like other people show up and stuff like that, but just super cool place to chill. Here's the kitchen. So got nice big spacious kitchen. Where I got a copper sink, and this is a while ago. It looks a little bit different now, but yeah, no, I mean plenty of room to cook. You got my little coffee station over here. Got the the stove, obviously. Got all my spices. Got to have all the spices, and for all the ingredients. And what else we got? Yeah, here's another view of the you can see the closet. There's the clawfoot, and I got the two the his and her sink. Then I got it to where I can sit in the tub and look out the window. So this is my old house. This is the one I sold. And when I moved, when I decided that I was done with Utah, I was done with cities. This is the house I was living in. But yeah, it's insane. I had this thing built for $274,000. The thing is going for almost $1 million now. It's just insane what the property values have done down there. Oh, here's one of the cars I flipped in California. I flipped classic cars for a while. That's how I came up with a bunch of money. or some of the money to build all this up here was flipping classic cars. So this is an old '68 Firebird that I flipped. There's a couple other ones actually. Here's a Mustang that I flipped. Here's a Plymouth Fury, 4-door Plymouth Fury. But yeah, I did a couple of really cool. So yeah, here's the outside of the cabin. This is what it looks like now. But yeah, super fun experience. Oh yeah, here's a mountain lion that we had to take down. So yeah, these things are no joke. These little mirrors, like Ellie says, murder mittens. You don't want them to lay these murder mittens on you. Because bad things happen. There's me at the helm on the sailboat. So here's my old boat, my old Malibu wake setter, my old wake surfing boat. You can see the Utah Lake, but yeah, this is my old life. This is the way I used to live before I got rid of all that. And then here is my dog and me. But yeah, so that is hold on. Let's see what else we got. Oh yeah, this is when I was building the coffee table. So I was masking it all off so that I could pour the epoxy, the resin. There's another fire I was on. What else we got? What else we got? There's the driveway in the wintertime. Oh yeah, this was my favorite 2-door Fury with a 454 in it. I wish I could have kept that one. This thing, I got a brand new gunmetal gray paint job done to it. Got the windows tinted. The engine was immaculate. Tapped the key. This thing was a beast. Oh, I wish I could have kept this thing. What else we got? There's the bridge down at the creek. So this is what it looks like, down there on the island. Then some of the garden. Oh, so Jay, Ellie, freaking Jeff and David. This is where I was talking about going cliff diving. This is just one of the spots. There's some higher up ones, but this is the little baby jump that you can do. So basically, you just kayak up to this, and you can climb up there, and you just huck yourself off. But ton of fun. Yeah, this is when I first got up here. No, this is that's the bridge that they're building. Hey, here's a couple of. This is the river where you can go cliff diving. There's the falls, and then if you go further up, is where you can do all the cliff diving. But just gorgeous, freaking beautiful. What else we got? What else we got? Yeah, me and my crew fighting the fires. I think that is about it. But yeah, to kind of recap, that's the important things to keep in mind when you're looking for a property is make sure that because you're going to have to do a septic, make sure that you have it contingent on that you can get a septic permit, or if it currently has a septic system already installed, bonus, and a well. So if you can find a property that already has a septic permit, a well, and if you can, find one that already has power. a power pole or a power post run to it, an RV hookup, then you're golden. But those are the three things that I would be very, very sure that you have dialed in. Is that you can get a septic system, that you have accessibility to a well, that you're not at such a high elevation above the water table that you're not going to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to drill a well. So septic, well, and accessibility and electric. So if you're too far from the closest power, you might end up paying a fortune. Like I had to pay 10 grand just to run it power from my neighbor's property onto mine. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So if possible, you want to find a property that already has power, a well, and septic on it optimally, but not necessary. But make sure that you take that into consideration when you're looking at the price. So if you're looking at a 20-acre plot in an area and say it's $80,000, but it doesn't have any of that stuff, and then you find another one for like 85 or 90, comparable piece of property, but it already has a septic system, a site cleared, for a house, power, and maybe a well. That is for basically 5 grand more, 5 or 10 grand more, you might be saving yourself $30,000 or more. So these are all things to take into consideration when looking at a property that you want to turn into a homestead. And then final thing before I go, one thing to keep in mind is the type of soil. So if you're going to be farming, like say you're in Arizona where it's all sand, you're going to have to haul in dirt. If you're going to have a garden, you're going to have to do planter boxes or something like that, or a greenhouse or something along those lines. If you are in the northern latitudes, you have to worry about a growing season. You have to worry about if you're on a southern exposure or a northern exposure. So my property is on a northern exposure. So during the wintertime and late fall and early spring, I don't get a whole lot of direct sunlight on my property on a good portion of it. Out where my garden is, I get a little more, but you have to take that into account. If things like peppers, tomatoes, things that like warmer soil before they'll grow and germinate and thrive, you might have to do a greenhouse so that you can get an early start on getting those things to where they can produce. Corn is another one. They have a saying called knee high by the 4th of July. If your corn isn't already that high, it's probably not going to finish. And in northern latitudes, your growing season is shorter. So that's another thing to keep in mind. So there's a lot of factors to take in when you are looking at a property. And it's really why I'm seriously contemplating, kind of like David has a coaching system for DeFi. I'm thinking about doing a coaching system for homesteading and emergency preparedness, to where I can, help people, through this process, because there's a lot of minds to navigate when it comes to, picking the right place, depending on what you're wanting to do. So anyway, that's about it. Let's see what the chat has to say. Just no mountain lions? Yeah. All right. Well, I guess on that note, I'm going to go. I think I might grab me a beer and go down to the island. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna grab me a beer and go down here. Let's see. Yeah, there you go. there's me down on the island. You can see this. This is the big creek. Here's one of the small creeks, and then there's another one over here. So so yeah. Now I think I'm going to go down here, kick my feet up in the sun, sip a beer. Nick, have a good night. You have a good night too, brother. Oh yeah, David. Yeah, having a mentor to show you the ropes is a thing for sure. You know, David's been a great mentor to me. When it comes to DeFi and crypto, he's been teaching me a ton. Just doing the show, just doing the show with him. And not even one-on-one coaching or anything. Just hosting the show with him. Just the information that he puts out. I've learned more since me and David and Jeff started the Node Network than I probably learned, in the year and a half when I was, basically trying to teach myself. So, yeah, it's been great, and I'm excited to see where all this is going. All this that we're building. With the website and all the AI tools that David's fine tuning right now. I think he's pretty much got the social media dialed in. Me and him before I went live here, we got all the socials connected to it. So that should really help us take off. The newsletter is about to go live. There's just so much going on, here at the Node Network. I mean, I just can't put it into words, but thank you all of you out there that watch. You're what really makes this all possible. In the chat, and those of you that support the channel. So Ellie, Jay, Nick, Zip, all of you that show up in the chat all the time. I can't thank you enough. You make us want to show up every day. So. No, absolutely, man. And I'll be sharing more. I just kind of, there's a lot more to share. Like I said, want to just try to progress into it. Show you kind of the beginning, and then of course, Jay even talked about if he ends up moving up here, we'll start doing, recordings of just us doing improvements on the property. If building a garden, if we want to add an extra greenhouse, whatever. So clearing, going and getting firewood. There's a lot of things that you got to do on a homestead because the power goes out up here quite a bit. In the wintertime, sometimes trees go down, and there's been times it's been like a day or two before the power comes back on. So I'll take all the stuff out of the fridge, go stick it in a box in the snow, and without electricity. I mean, I got my propane heater, wall heater, but I have an emergency 5-6 cord of wood, basically truckloads, but cord of wood, so that I, no matter what, have wood to keep my cabin warm in the wintertime. So you got to have redundancies, power backups, water backups, heat, backups. It's, you got to have, it's redundancy is key up here. You got to have, flashlights, and I got a bunch of light bulbs that I have screwed in, like in my pantry, my laundry room, that they have a battery backup in them, to where if the lights go out, at least I have some kind of light so I can see and, find a flashlight and get myself situated, maybe light some lanterns and candles and stuff like that. And, pop some wine and, just sit back and relax. But thinking about getting a UPS, a battery backup for my Starlink, because then, even with the power out, I'd still have internet. So anyway, that's just me thinking out loud. But anyway, I think I'm gonna go have a beer on the island and get some sunshine, and then get back to work growing the channel. So again, appreciate y'all. Until next time, Veteran Crypto out.